Hello, and welcome to the Movie Universe. I'm your host, Movie Fiend. Well, Christmas is almost here, folks, and because of that, I have to do a Christmas special. And in this case, I'm talking about one that I'm sure you have probably never heard of. It's called Silent Mouse. Now, if the name sounds a little familiar to you, it's basically a story about how the song Silent Night came to be. Basically, it goes like this. The story takes place in Austria, in a little town called Orpendorf. We meet a narrator who tells us a story about a mouse named A. Naughty Mouse. Apparently, Naughty was a member of Mouse Organists, and what they do is they help tend the bellows and all the church organs, and in her case, she was with the organ mender. However, she gets left behind, and, well, the organ that she was going to check up on, unfortunately, the previous mouse had passed away, so she just took over. And by sheer coincidence, she's adopted by the church organist's son. And during that time, we get to know some of our characters, such as Franz Gruber, who is the organist, his son Felix Gruber, a young priest, Father Joseph Moore, and the head priest of the village, Pater Norsler, who, in a nutshell, everybody's good except for Pater Norsler. He is a complete jerk. He has things his way, and of course, well, to make a long story short, he told the organ mender to just carry on. He wanted to have someone there to check the organ to make sure there was no unnecessary expenses on the bill. He just figured that he'd just take the chance on it regardless. He'll just blame someone else if something goes wrong. Weeks go by and the organ holds until Christmas Eve, when finally the bellows had broken. In the meantime, Joseph Moore and Franz Gruber were trying to figure out what they should do. In a nutshell, Nani hints at the idea of them using Father Moore's guitar as musical accompaniment. And it's at this point that Father Moore is struck with inspiration because he had written a poem about the stillness of the night, and those would become the words to Silent Night. After that, Franz Gruber tries to come up with a score to the poem because there was a tune that was kind of going in his head, and he only gotten so far. However, the mouse had run across the inkwell and right across the sheet of paper, and by some coincidence, it proved to be the right type of notes that he needed for the rest of it. And on Christmas Eve, they play the song, and everybody loved it. Unfortunately, Pater Norsler didn't, and he basically had Father Moore kicked out of that church. Meanwhile, Gruber gives the song away to the organ mender, and at that point, Nani tells one of the other mouse organists, who happens to be with the organ mender, to try to spread the song around. And pretty much the entire organization spreads it all the way across Austria, but mostly by giving it to a group of folk singers known as the Strasses. And from here on in, the rest of the story is basically Nani trying to let the world know who it was that wrote the song. Now, that's basically the overview of the story. And believe it or not, there is a basis in fact in it. Because, as we all know, the song Silent Night is a real song. And at the same time, Father Joseph Moore and Franz Gruber were real people, and they did write the song. However, this little TV special actually has a little more truth to it than you might think. Now, obviously, we could rule out the part about the mouse organist who spread it all around Austria. Obviously, that's not true at all. However, it is true that the church organ was broken, so they had to use a guitar when they sang the song. And it is true that Franz Gruber did give a copy of the song to the organ mender, but he was the one who actually gave it to the Strasses, who spread it all around Europe. It's actually a pretty decent film. Now, most people would probably find it to be pretty boring, I hate to admit, but it is true. And as for the cast, they do play their parts really well. However, most of them I'm sure you have never heard of. Franz Gruber is played by Gregor Fischer, who has made quite a few appearances in TVs and movies in England. Father Joseph Moore is played by Jack Mackenzie, who, like Gregor, He actually has done quite a few scenes in TV and movies in England. However, he actually played a lieutenant in the Rebel Force in Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. Felix Gruber is played by Richard Blaine. This seems to be his only claim to fame because he really has done nothing else. Pattern Nosler is played by Phil McCall, who did a lot of TV shows in England back in the 80s and 90s. And sad but true, most of the characters you probably have never seen, like I said, or heard of before, except for maybe one. And that would be our narrator, Lynn Redgrave. Now, she has actually made quite a few appearances in both television and in movies, in both England and here in America. She appeared in an episode of Murder, She Wrote. She also played the Wicked Witch of the East in The Lion of Oz. She's also been on other shows such as The Wild Thornberrys and Kojak. Now, each one of the characters do play their parts really well, but it's really the mouse that really is the main star here, and that's no lie. This is not CGI, this isn't stop motion animation or puppetry or anything like that. This is a real mouse that's actually running around doing these things. And I know what you might be wondering. Who trained that mouse? Well, I don't know. I looked it up and I cannot find anything. They just won't talk about it. So, whoever trained this mouse to cooperate obviously did a good job, and obviously they didn't list this person. So, that's all there is to it. What's even more interesting is the fact that this special was actually filmed on location in Austria. However, they also filmed it in Czechoslovakia, most likely due to the fact that there's still a lot of old towns that do look like they're straight out of the 1800s. It's actually a good story that actually does have inspiration from legend as well as fact. Now, I've already talked about the fact about how the song came to be with Father Moore and Franz Gruber. However, there's also a little legend attached to it that goes basically like this. While Franz Gruber was working on the tune, a church mouse just happened to scurry across the sheet music and left some paw prints on it that basically completed the tune. Whether or not it's true, I couldn't say. It's just an old legend that I've heard years ago, and these days it's pretty much forgotten. I highly recommend that if you ever get the time, try to look this up. It's actually pretty good. Although I will admit, because this was made in England and it was made in 1988, well, the British do have a tendency to do a lot of talking, so therefore, a lot of people would probably find this to be pretty boring. And at the same time, I'm sure a lot of people would question some of the history because, well, for instance, there's no indication that there ever was a Father Nosler. I tried looking this guy up. He doesn't exist. Why they thought they needed to create a jerk in this story, or a villain, if you will, I don't know. I guess they felt they needed to do it. And furthermore, when you hear the song, it seems like they took a few liberties with it because, well, when they first sing it, it sounds like this.
Still the night, holy the night, sleeps the world, hid from sight. Mary and Joseph in stable bed, watch o'er the child beloved and fair, sleeping in heavenly rest, sleeping in heavenly rest.
Now, it is possible that maybe that's what the words originally were, but I've looked it up in every which form I can. There is no proof that it ever was sung like that, ever. So I guess they took a few liberties with it. And there is one thing I'm sure a lot of people might get a little annoyed with, and that would be all the mouse puns that our narrator gives. In fact, there are so many puns that, I'm just going to make a little video just showing that alone. I know my friend Bonnie, she loves puns and she would just love this. So I think I'll do that shortly afterward. But again, if you ever get the time, try and look this up. You might actually like it. This is Movie Fan, signing off.